My parents disowned me pregnant at 16 years later. They begged for my son who never existed. My name is Sophia, and I am 32 years old. 16 years ago, my parents threw me out on the street because I committed the unforgivable sin of getting pregnant as a teenager. They called me a disgrace. They said I had ruined everything they had worked for. They slammed the door behind me and never looked back. But here's the thing they never knew. The son they spent years imagining the grandson they eventually came crawling back to meet, he never existed. And when they finally showed up at my door, after all those years begging for forgiveness, begging to be part of my life again, I had a surprise waiting for them that they never saw coming. Before I tell you what happened, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if stories about survival strength and unexpected justice speak to you, hit that like button right now and subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story. Trust me, you are going to want to stay until the very end of this one because what I did when my parents came back will leave you speechless. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and reputation means everything. Our house sat on Maple Street, a 2-story white colonial, with a wraparound porch and a picket fence that my father repainted every spring. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, the kind you see in magazine advertisements or holiday greeting cards. But perfection, I learned early, is usually just a mask covering something much uglier underneath. My father, Richard, was 52 years old back then. He worked as a manager at the local bank, the only bank in town, which made him feel like royalty. He wore pressed suits every single day, even on his days off. His gold watch gleamed on his wrist, and he checked it constantly, as if time was something he could control, just like everything else in his life. He served on the town council. He shook hands at church every Sunday. He smiled at everyone who mattered, and he made sure everyone knew that the family bearing his name was above reproach. My mother, Patricia, was 48 years old. She chaired the Parent-Teacher Association and organized charity events at our church. She baked pies for every funeral, every birth, every wedding in town. Neighbors called her a saint, but my mother's kindness had conditions. She cared deeply about what other people thought, and she measured love in public appearances. Her favorite question was always the same. What will the neighbors say? Not how do you feel, not are you okay, just what will the neighbors say. Then there was my brother Derek, 4 years older than me. Derek was the golden child in every possible way. Star quarterback on the high school football team. Straight A student, accepted to Ohio State on a full scholarship. My parents worshipped the ground he walked on. His trophies filled an entire shelf in the living room. His report cards were framed on the wall. When Derek spoke at dinner, everyone listened. When Derek had an opinion, it became family law. And then there was me, Sophia, the afterthought. The accident my mother once mentioned in a whisper to her sister when she thought I could not hear. I was not athletic like Derek. I was not charming like my father. I did not care about committees and appearances like my mother. I liked to draw. I filled notebook after notebook with sketches of trees and faces and imaginary places. I wrote poetry in journals I kept hidden under my mattress. I preferred the company of books to the company of people, and in my family that made me strange. My father never missed an opportunity to remind me of my shortcomings. "Why can you not be more like your brother?" he would ask at dinner while passing the mashed potatoes. Derek would look down at his plate uncomfortable but silent. My mother would nod in agreement as if my father had just stated an obvious truth. I would shrink in my chair feeling smaller with every word. There were moments, rare ones, when I thought maybe they loved me after all. I remember one Christmas when I was 11 years old. My mother spent an entire afternoon teaching me how to roll pie crust. Her hands guided mine, patient and warm. For those few hours, I felt like I belonged. But then my aunt arrived, and my mother handed me a broom and told me to make myself useful while the adults talked. The warmth vanished as quickly as it had appeared. When I was 13, I painted a portrait of our house for my mother's birthday. I spent 3 weeks on it mixing colors until they matched the exact shade of our shutters, capturing the way morning light fell across the porch. When I gave it to her, she smiled briefly, said "Thank you, dear," and put it in a drawer. I never saw it again. A month later, Derek gave her a gift card to her favorite restaurant. She cried tears of joy and hugged him for 5 minutes. I watched from the doorway, wondering what I had done wrong. By the time I turned 15, I had stopped trying to earn their approval. I realized that no matter what I did, I would never be Derek. I would never be enough. I started spending more time alone in my room, sketching, writing, dreaming of a life somewhere far away from Maple Street. I ate dinner in silence. I answered questions with one-word responses. I became a ghost in my own home, present but invisible. One evening, I overheard my mother talking to her friend Janet in the kitchen. They thought I was upstairs, but I had come down for water and stopped at the bottom of the stairs when I heard my name. Sophia is just different, my mother said with a sigh. She does not have Derek's drive. She does not have any ambition at all, really. I worry about her future. Janet murmured something sympathetic. I just hope she does not embarrass us, my mother continued. That is all I ask. Just do not embarrass us. I went back upstairs without the water. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, my mother's words echoing in my head. Do not embarrass us. That was her hope for me. Not that I would be happy. Not that I would find my passion, just that I would not embarrass them. That same year, I met Marcus at the public library. He was sitting at a table near the window, reading a worn paperback copy of a book I recognized. His hair fell across his forehead, and he chewed on the end of his pencil as he read. He looked up when I walked past, and he smiled. A real smile, not the practiced kind my parents wore in public. I did not know it then, but that smile would change everything. It would lead me to the greatest love I had ever known, and the deepest pain I had ever felt. It would lead me to the night that my parents threw me away like garbage, and it would lead me eventually to the surprise that I had been saving for them all along. Marcus had transferred to our school at the beginning of sophomore year. His parents had divorced the previous summer, and his mother had moved to California with her new boyfriend, leaving Marcus behind with his grandmother Eleanor. He did not talk about it much, but I could see the hurt in his eyes when other kids mentioned their families. He understood what it felt like to be unwanted. That made us kindred spirits in a way that I had never experienced with anyone else. We started meeting at the library after school. At first, it was just coincidence, both of us seeking refuge among the shelves of books. But soon it became intentional. We would sit at the table by the window sharing stories and dreams while the afternoon light faded outside. Marcus wanted to become a carpenter like his grandfather had been. He showed me pictures of furniture his grandfather had built, beautiful pieces with carved details and smooth finishes. His eyes lit up when he talked about working with his hands, creating something real and lasting. I showed him my sketches, something I had never done for anyone before. He did not laugh or dismiss them the way I expected. Instead, he studied each drawing carefully, asking questions about my techniques, complimenting the details I had worked hardest on. He said I had a gift. No one had ever told me that before. We started meeting outside of school. There was a small coffee shop 2 blocks away from the high school, a place called The Grind, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. We would sit in the corner booth, sharing a single cup of hot chocolate because neither of us had much money, talking for hours, until the owner started sweeping the floor and hinting that we should leave. I never told my parents about Marcus. I knew exactly what they would say. His father had left town after some kind of scandal, something about unpaid debts and angry creditors. His mother had abandoned him. His grandmother worked at a laundromat. In my parents' eyes, Marcus was exactly the kind of person they did not want me associating with. So I kept him secret, a precious treasure, hidden from their judgmental gaze. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Marcus listened when I talked about my dreams of becoming an artist. He did not tell me to be realistic or to get my head out of the clouds. He encouraged me. He believed in me. When I told him about how my parents compared me to Derek, he shook his head and said their blindness was their loss. He said I was extraordinary. And even though I did not believe it myself, hearing him say it made me want to try. Marcus gave me a gift for my 16th birthday. It was a leather journal, soft and brown, with pages that smelled like vanilla. He had saved up for 3 months from his part-time job bagging groceries. On the first page, he had written a note in his careful handwriting. Your thoughts deserve a beautiful place to live. Always, Marcus. I cried when I read it. Nobody had ever given me something so thoughtful. My parents had given me a $100 bill in a card they clearly had not written themselves. Derek had not bothered to acknowledge my birthday at all. But Marcus had noticed me. He had thought about what would make me happy. He had cared. Our relationship deepened as autumn turned to winter. We talked about everything. Our fears, our hopes, our secrets. Marcus told me about the nightmares he had, dreams where his mother came back only to leave again. I told him about the loneliness I felt, even in a house full of people. We understood each other in a way that felt almost magical. One night in early November, my father and I had a terrible argument. He had seen my report card, and while my English and art grades were excellent, my math grade had slipped to a C-. He shouted for 20 minutes about how I was throwing away my future. He called me lazy. He called me a disappointment. My mother sat in her chair nodding along, adding occasionally that I needed to apply myself. Derek was at college by then, so I could not even escape to his room to avoid the confrontation. After they finally finished, I went to my room and climbed out the window. I had done it before, sneaking out to clear my head. But that night, I went straight to Marcus. His grandmother's house was 3 blocks away, a small cottage with a vegetable garden and a porch swing. I knocked on his window, and he came outside without hesitation. We sat on the porch swing wrapped in a blanket, and I cried. I told him everything my father had said. I told him I felt worthless. I told him I did not understand why I could never be good enough. Marcus held me close. He smelled like sawdust and soap. He told me that my father was wrong. He told me I was perfect exactly as I was. He told me that someday I would show them all what I was capable of, and they would regret every cruel word they had ever spoke. That night, something shifted between us. The line between friendship and something more dissolved completely. We did not plan what happened next. We were young and hurting and desperate for connection. We made decisions that seemed right in the moment, decisions that would alter the course of my entire life. 2 months later, I started feeling sick in the mornings. At first, I thought it was stress, or maybe the flu. But when the sickness did not go away, when I realized I had missed my period not once, but twice, a cold terror settled in my stomach. I drove 10 miles to a pharmacy in the next town, terrified that someone might recognize me. I bought a pregnancy test with shaking hands and took it in the gas station bathroom. 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately, bright and unmistakable. I sat on the cold tile floor of that bathroom stall for almost an hour. My mind raced through possibilities, through futures that had suddenly collapsed into a single terrifying point. I was 16 years old. I was pregnant. And I knew with absolute certainty that my parents would never forgive me. I called Marcus from a payphone, my voice barely above a whisper. He listened in silence, and when I finished, he said 4 words that I will never forget. We will figure it out. He said he would be there for me, that we would face this together, that he would not let me go through it alone. For a brief moment, holding the phone against my ear, I almost believed we might be okay. I decided to tell my parents on a Sunday evening. Sunday was family dinner night, a tradition my mother insisted on, even though Derek was away at college. We ate at the formal dining table with the good china, pretending to be the perfect family, while tension simmered beneath every polite exchange. I had rehearsed what I would say at least 100 times. I had imagined every possible reaction, prepared responses for every question. Marcus had offered to come with me, but I thought it would be better if I told them alone first. I thought maybe they might surprise me. Maybe they would be angry at first, but then remember that I was their daughter. Maybe they would help me figure out what to do. I was so naive. We had finished the main course, roast chicken with vegetables, and my mother was bringing out dessert when I cleared my throat. My hands were trembling under the table. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." My mother paused with the pie plates in her hands. My father looked up from his coffee, eyebrows raised in mild curiosity. I took a deep breath. I am pregnant. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not just quiet. It was a vacuum sucking all the air out of the room. My mother set the plates down very slowly, as if they might shatter from the weight of what I had said. My father's face went from confused to disbelieving to something I had never seen before. Pure, incandescent rage. "What did you say?" His voice was barely a whisper, which somehow made it more terrifying than shouting. "I am pregnant," I repeated, and my voice cracked on the last word. My father stood up so fast his chair fell backward and crashed against the floor. He slammed both hands on the table, making the dishes jump and rattle. "You stupid, stupid girl." He was shouting now. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you have any idea what people will say?" "Richard," my mother said. But it was not a protest. It was more like she was agreeing with him and just wanted him to lower his volume. My father came around the table toward me. I shrank back in my chair, truly afraid for the first time in my life. Who is the father? His eyes were wild. Who did this to you? His name is Marcus, I whispered. Marcus Bennett. He goes to my school. Marcus Bennett. My father spat the name like it was poison. The Bennett boy. The one whose father skipped town owing money to half the county. The one whose mother ran off with some salesman. That is who you let ruin your life. He did not ruin anything I tried to say, but my father was not listening. My mother finally spoke, her voice cold and measured. How far along are you? About 3 months. She closed her eyes. 3 months. So there is still time. I did not understand at first. Time for what? My father stopped pacing. He looked at my mother, and something passed between them, a decision made in a single glance. You will end this, he said flatly. Tomorrow, I will take you to a clinic in Columbus where nobody knows us. We will fix this, and we will never speak of it again. No. The word came out before I could stop it. I did not even know I was going to say it until it was already hanging in the air between us. What did you say to me? My father's voice was dangerously quiet. I said no. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. I cannot do that. I will not. The next few minutes blurred together in a nightmare of shouting and accusations. My mother called me selfish. My father called me a disgrace. They said I had destroyed the family's reputation. They said Derek would be humiliated. They said I had thrown away my entire future for a few minutes of pleasure with a worthless boy from a worthless family. I tried to explain that I loved Marcus. I tried to tell them that we would figure it out together, that we would get married, that we would make it work. They laughed, actually laughed as if the idea of me having a plan was the most ridiculous thing they had ever heard. Finally, my father delivered his ultimatum. Either you end this pregnancy tomorrow or you leave this house tonight. There is no third option. I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign of the woman who had taught me to make pie crust that Christmas afternoon. But she would not meet my eyes. She stood with her arms crossed, silent and cold. Then, I guess I'm leaving tonight, I said. My father pointed toward the stairs. You have 30 minutes to pack your things. Take only what you can carry. Leave your phone. Leave your car keys. They belong to this family, and you are no longer part of it. I walked upstairs on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I grabbed my school backpack and stuffed it with whatever I could reach. A few changes of clothes, my leather journal from Marcus, a photograph of my grandmother, who had died when I was 10, my sketchbook. I left behind almost everything, but I grabbed what mattered most. When I came back downstairs, Derek was there. He had driven home from college, called by our mother, the moment I had gone upstairs. He stood by the back door looking uncomfortable, unable to meet my eyes. I walked past our parents without another word. My father had already turned away, retreating to his study, as if I had already ceased to exist. My mother watched me go with an expression I could not read. Satisfaction, maybe, or relief, as if a problem had been solved and she could finally move on. Derek followed me to the back door. As I stepped outside into the cold November night, he caught my arm. Sophia, wait. I turned to look at him, my golden brother, the one who had always had everything I wanted. He pressed something into my hand. I looked down, 4 $20 bills folded tight. I am sorry, he whispered. He looked like he wanted to say more, but then our father's voice came from inside, sharp and commanding, and Derek flinched. He stepped back inside and closed the door. I stood alone in the backyard, $80 in my hand, a backpack on my shoulder, and a baby growing inside me. The porch light clicked off. The house went dark. I started walking. I walked 3 miles that night, following the route Marcus and I had taken so many times before. The November air bit through my thin jacket, and I could see my breath puffing white in the darkness. Every step felt heavier than the last, but I kept moving. I did not have any other choice. Eleanor's house glowed warm and golden when I finally reached it. A small cottage at the end of a quiet street with window boxes full of winter cabbages and a wind chime singing softly on the porch. I stood at the gate for a long moment, suddenly afraid. What if she turned me away too? What if she blamed me for what had happened? But I had nowhere else to go. I knocked on the door, and Eleanor answered almost immediately, as if she had been waiting. She was 71 years old, small and wiry, with silver hair pulled back in a loose bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked at me, at my tear-stained face and my bulging backpack and my shivering shoulders, and she did not ask a single question. "Come inside, child," she said. "You look frozen half to death." She wrapped me in a quilt and sat me on her sofa. She made me hot tea with honey and brought me a bowl of soup she had been saving for tomorrow's lunch. She let me cry without demanding explanations. When I finally ran out of tears, she simply said, "You can stay here as long as you need." Marcus came home an hour later. He had been working a late shift at the grocery store. When he saw me on the sofa, his face went through about 10 different emotions in 5 seconds. He rushed over and held me, and for a while, neither of us said anything at all. The next few weeks settled into a strange kind of routine. I slept on the sofa in Eleanor's living room. Marcus went to school during the day and worked evenings. I could not go back to school. My father had already called the principal and withdrawn me, claiming we were relocating for his job. No one at school knew the truth. No one came looking for me. I tried to make myself useful. I cleaned the house while Eleanor was at work at the laundromat. I cooked dinner from recipes she taught me. I read the books on her shelves and practiced my drawing and tried not to think about the future. But the future was coming whether I was ready or not. My belly grew bigger each week. Eleanor took me to a free clinic for prenatal checkups, and the doctor said everything looked healthy. A boy the ultrasound showed. Marcus and I started talking about names. He wanted something strong like his grandfather's name. I wanted something hopeful, something that would mean new beginnings. We were so young, so naive. We thought love would be enough to carry us through. In early March, when I was 6 months pregnant, Marcus decided to drop out of school. He said we needed money more than we needed diplomas. He got a job at a construction site hauling lumber and mixing cement for $8 an hour. It was hard work, dangerous work, but it paid more than the grocery store. I begged him to be careful. He laughed and kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. He said he would be fine. He said he would work hard for a few years, learn the trade properly, and then start his own carpentry business. He said we would have our own house someday, a place where our son could grow up loved and wanted. I believed him. I believed every word. On a Tuesday afternoon in late March, I was in the kitchen helping Eleanor prepare dinner. We were making her famous vegetable stew, the one that simmered all day and filled the house with warmth and comfort. I was peeling carrots when the phone rang. Eleanor answered it. I watched her face change. The color drained from her cheeks. The peeler slipped from my hand and clattered on the floor. What happened, I asked, but I already knew. Something in my chest had tightened, a cold hand squeezing my heart. "There has been an accident," Eleanor said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "At the construction site. Marcus fell." The next few hours exist in my memory as fragments. Eleanor driving her old station wagon too fast through empty streets. The harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room. Doctors in scrubs speaking words I could not understand. Fall from scaffolding. 20 feet. Head trauma. Induced coma. I sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room. My hands pressed against my swollen belly, and I prayed for the first time since I was a child. I bargained with God, with the universe, with anyone who might be listening. I promised everything I had if Marcus would just open his eyes. 3 days later, Marcus died without ever waking up. I was not there when it happened. Eleanor had finally convinced me to go home and rest, saying she would stay with him. The phone call came at 4 in the morning. I answered on the first ring, and I knew from Eleanor's broken voice that it was over. I did not scream. I did not cry. Something inside me simply went quiet, like a candle being snuffed out. I hung up the phone and lay back down on the sofa and stared at the ceiling until morning came. The funeral was small, just Eleanor, a few of Marcus's co-workers, and me. The service was held at a chapel on the edge of town, paid for by donations from the construction company. I wore a black dress that Eleanor had found at a thrift store, let out at the seams to fit my pregnant belly. I did not speak. I could not. 1 week after we buried Marcus, I woke in the middle of the night to a sharp pain in my abdomen. I stumbled to the bathroom and found blood. So much blood! Eleanor rushed me to the hospital. The doctors tried to save the baby. They really tried. But the stress, the grief, the trauma of everything that had happened, it was too much. My body gave up. My son was born too early, too small, too silent. He never took a single breath. I held him for a few minutes before they took him away. He was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes. A face that looked like Marcus, peaceful and still. I told him I was sorry. I told him I loved him. I told him his father was waiting for him somewhere beyond the pain of this world. Then they took him, and I was alone. I spent 2 days in the hospital. Eleanor stayed with me the entire time, sleeping in the chair beside my bed. When I was discharged, she brought me back to her cottage, and I crawled into bed and did not get up for a very long time. In the span of 2 weeks, I had lost everything. The father of my child, my baby, my future. I was 16 years old, and I felt like I had already lived an entire lifetime of grief. One night, about a month after losing the baby, I made a decision. I would not tell anyone what had happened. My parents, the people in my old life, they did not deserve to know. They would feel vindicated probably. They would say I deserved it. They would use my tragedy as proof that they had been right all along, so I let them believe the lie. I let them imagine that I had given birth to a healthy baby boy, that I was struggling somewhere with a child and no support, that their grandchild was growing up without them. Let them wonder, I thought. Let them imagine what they missed. It was a small, bitter form of revenge, but it was all I had. The first year after losing Marcus and the baby was the darkest period of my life. I existed more than I lived. I slept too much. I ate too little. I would go days without speaking more than a few words. The grief sat on my chest like a physical weight, pressing me down into the mattress, making it hard to breathe. Eleanor never gave up on me. She brought me soup and toast and tea. She sat beside my bed and read aloud from her favorite novels. She did not try to force me to feel better or tell me to move on. She simply stayed a steady presence in the storm. One morning, about 6 months after I lost everything, Eleanor came into my room and set something on the nightstand. It was a flyer for a community art class held at the recreation center downtown. "You used to love to draw," she said quietly. "Maybe it would help." I looked at the flyer. I looked at Eleanor's hopeful face. I thought about how much she had given me, this woman who owed me nothing, who had taken me in and cared for me when my own parents had thrown me away. I signed up for the class. That small decision was the first step on a very long road back to myself. The class met twice a week in a sunny room with big windows. The instructor was a retired art teacher named Margaret, who had silver hair and paint permanently stained under her fingernails. She looked at my sketches, the first ones I had drawn in almost a year, and she smiled. "You have real talent," she said. "Have you ever considered going to school for this?" I explained my situation. No high school diploma, no money, no family support. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. Then she handed me a pamphlet for the GED program at the local community college. "Get this first," she said. "Then we will talk about scholarships." I got my GED at 18, studying at Eleanor's kitchen table every night after my shifts at the diner. I had started working as a waitress when I turned 17, earning tips to help with groceries and save for the future. It was exhausting work, but it kept me busy, kept my mind focused on something other than loss. After I passed my GED exam, Margaret helped me apply for art scholarships. I was accepted into the graphic design program at a community college 30 miles away, with a scholarship that covered most of my tuition. I commuted every day an hour each way because I could not afford to live on campus, but I did not mind the drive. Every mile was taking me further from the girl I had been and closer to the woman I was becoming. I graduated at 22 with the highest grades in my class. By then, Eleanor was getting older, her joints aching, her movements slower. I took care of her, the way she had taken care of me, cooking her meals and driving her to doctor appointments and reading to her at night. I got a job at a small design firm in Columbus. The owner, a woman named Sandra, had started the company in her garage 20 years earlier. She saw something in me, some spark of potential that I did not yet see in myself. She became my mentor, teaching me not just design skills, but business skills too. How to talk to clients, how to price my work, how to believe in my own value. I worked at Sandra's firm for 5 years, saving every dollar I could. At 27, I opened my own design company. Just me and a laptop, at first working out of Eleanor's living room. But slowly, steadily, the business grew. I hired my first employee at 28, my second at 29. By the time I turned 30, I had an office downtown and a team of 6 talented designers. Life was not perfect. I still had bad days. I still dreamed about Marcus, about the baby, about the family I had lost before it ever really began. But I had built something real, something that was mine, something that nobody could take away from me. And then I met Nathan. He was an architect working on a project for one of my clients. We met at a design meeting arguing about color palettes and window placements. He had kind eyes and a quick laugh, and he did not seem intimidated by my opinions or my success. We went for coffee after the meeting. Coffee turned into dinner, turned into long walks, turned into something deeper. I told him everything eventually, about my parents, about Marcus, about the baby. He listened without judgment, without pity. He held my hand and said that my past did not define me, that my scars made me stronger, not weaker. We got engaged when I was 30 years old. Eleanor cried happy tears when I told her. She said Marcus would have wanted this for me. She said I deserved all the happiness in the world. 2 months before our wedding, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 79 years old. I was devastated, but I was also grateful. Grateful that she had lived to see me find love again. Grateful for every day we had together. Grateful that I got to hold her hand at the end and tell her thank you for saving my life. Nathan and I got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, just us and a few close friends. I wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers, Eleanor's favorites. In my pocket, I kept a small photograph of Marcus, because I wanted him there too in some way. I was 31 years old. I had a husband who adored me, a successful business, a life I had built from nothing. I had survived the worst things imaginable, and I had emerged on the other side stronger than ever. But there was still one chapter of my story that had not yet been written. One final confrontation that had been waiting for 16 years. My parents were about to come back into my life, and I was finally ready to face them. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, mixed in with the usual stack of business mail. The return address made my heart stop. My parents' names, their Maple Street address, the same house they had thrown me out of 16 years ago. I sat at my desk for a long time, just holding the envelope. My hands were trembling. After all these years, all the work I had done to heal one piece of paper could still shake me to my core. I opened it carefully. The letter was from my mother, written in her precise, elegant handwriting. She wrote that my father had been diagnosed with heart disease. He needed surgery, a serious operation with uncertain outcomes. The experience had caused them to reflect on their lives and their choices. They had regrets, she said. They wanted to make amends, and then the part that made me laugh out loud, a bitter sound that echoed in my empty office. They wanted to meet their grandson. They had heard through some distant family connection that I had a son. They wanted to know him before it was too late. They wanted a chance to be grandparents. They had heard I had a son. Of course they had. I had let that lie grow and spread for 16 years. I had never corrected anyone who assumed. I had let the rumor become truth in the minds of everyone who had known me back then. I showed the letter to Nathan that evening. He read it twice, then set it down and looked at me. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I did not know. For 16 years, I had imagined this moment. I had rehearsed speeches. I had fantasized about rejecting them the way they had rejected me, but now that it was actually happening, I felt strangely calm. "I think I need to see them," I said finally. "I think I need to close this chapter." Nathan nodded. "Then I am coming with you." We agreed to meet them at a coffee shop in Columbus Neutral Territory. I chose a place near my office, somewhere I felt comfortable and in control. I dressed carefully that morning in a tailored blazer and professional dress. I wanted them to see what I had become. I wanted them to understand what they had discarded. My parents arrived 10 minutes early. I watched them through the window before going inside. They looked old. My father was using a cane. My mother's hair had gone completely white. They sat at a corner table looking around nervously, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I walked in and stood by their table. They looked up at me, and I saw recognition dawn in their eyes, followed by something that might have been regret. "Sophia." My mother's voice was thick with emotion. "You look wonderful." I sat down across from them. Nathan took the chair beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. For a few minutes, we made awkward small talk. They asked about my work. I gave brief answers. They commented on the weather. I nodded politely. The whole time, I could see them glancing around as if expecting a child to appear at any moment. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Sophia, we came because we want to make things right. We know we made mistakes. Terrible mistakes." My mother nodded eagerly. We want to meet our grandson. We want to be part of his life. We have missed so much already. I looked at them, these strangers who used to be my parents. I thought about all the nights I had spent alone and afraid, all the tears I had cried, all the times I had wished they would come find me and tell me they were sorry. They had come. 16 years too late, but they had come. There is no grandson, I said quietly. My mother's face went pale. What do you mean? I said that my son died before he was ever born. I had a miscarriage 1 week after Marcus died. I lost them both within days of each other. I was 16 years old, alone grieving, and my baby died inside me. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. My father stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. All these years, my mother whispered, you thought what I asked. You thought I was out there struggling with a child and no help. You thought your grandchild was growing up poor and neglected. Did that make you feel better about your choice? Did it help you sleep at night? My father looked down at his hands. We wanted to reach out. Over the years, we talked about it many times. But it was easier not to. I finished for him. It was easier to imagine a grandson than to actually confront what you did to your daughter. They did not deny it. I leaned forward. Here is what you need to understand. The surprise I have for you today is not a child. The surprise is that I survived. I survived losing Marcus. I survived losing my baby. I survived being abandoned by my own parents at 16 years old. And I did not just survive. I thrived. I built a business. I found love. I created a family of my own. I gestured to Nathan. This is my husband. And next month we are finalizing the adoption of our daughter, a 7-year-old girl named Lily, who needed a home just like I once did. My mother started to cry. Can we meet her? Can we be part of your life? I thought about it, really thought about it. And then I shook my head. No, not yet, maybe not ever. I do not know. But what I do know is that I did not come here today to reconcile. I came here to tell you the truth, and I came here to tell you something else. I stood up and Nathan stood with me. I forgive you, I said, not for your sake, but for mine. I am letting go of the anger and the hurt because I deserve peace. But forgiveness does not mean I owe you anything. It does not mean I will let you back into my life. It means I am free, finally completely free. I left them sitting there at the coffee shop table. I did not look back. Driving home that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. Nathan held my hand, not saying anything, just being present. The road stretched out before us, leading toward our future. And for the first time in a very long time, I was not carrying the weight of my past on my shoulders. That evening, we picked up Lily from her foster home. She had been living there for 3 months while we completed the adoption paperwork, but she already felt like ours. She had big brown eyes and a gap-toothed smile, and a habit of asking approximately 1 million questions about everything. She ran toward us when she saw the car pull up, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Are we going home now? She asked eagerly. For real home. For real home, I told her, scooping her into my arms. Forever home. We spent that first evening together, doing ordinary things. We made spaghetti for dinner, Lily standing on a step stool to help stir the sauce. We watched a cartoon movie on the couch, all 3 of us piled under a blanket. I braided Lily's hair before bed and read her 2 stories because she begged so sweetly for a second one. When she was finally asleep, I stood in the doorway of her room and watched her for a long time. This child who had known rejection and loss just like me. This child who deserved all the love in the world, just like every child does. Nathan came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. You okay? He whispered. I nodded. I was thinking about Eleanor and Marcus and the baby. He held me tighter. I think they would be proud, I said, of who I am, of what we are building. I know they would be, Nathan replied. In the weeks and months that followed, our little family found its rhythm. Lily started 2nd grade at the elementary school near our house. She made friends. She drew pictures that I proudly displayed on the refrigerator. She called me Mama and Nathan Daddy, and every time I heard those words, my heart felt like it might burst. I created a scholarship fund in Eleanor's name, providing art supplies and tuition assistance to single mothers who wanted to pursue creative careers. The first recipient was a 19-year-old woman named Jessica, who reminded me so much of myself at that age. Watching her unwrap her first set of professional colored pencils, seeing the hope in her eyes, I understood that my pain had not been meaningless. It had prepared me for this. It had given me the wisdom and compassion to help others who were walking the same dark roads I once walked. My parents reached out a few more times over the following year, letters mostly, phone calls that I did not answer. Eventually they stopped trying. I heard through a cousin that my father's surgery had been successful, that he was recovering well. I was glad for that. I did not wish them suffering. I simply did not need them anymore. Derek called me once, about 8 months after my meeting with our parents. It was awkward at first. We had not spoken in over 15 years. But he apologized, really apologized for not standing up for me back then. He said he had always regretted his silence. He said he understood if I could not forgive him. I told him I would think about it, and I did. A few months later, I called him back and we talked for 3 hours. We are not close now, not like siblings should be, but we are finding our way towards something. A tentative connection, a possibility of healing. As for me, I have learned that family is not defined by blood. Family is defined by love, by showing up, by staying when things get hard. Eleanor was more of a mother to me than Patricia ever was. Nathan is more of a partner than I ever dreamed possible. And Lily is my daughter, in every way that matters, bound to me by choice rather than chance. I still think about Marcus sometimes. I still dream about the baby who never got to take his first breath. I visit their graves twice a year on Marcus's birthday, and on the anniversary of the day I lost them both. I bring flowers, and I sit for a while, and I tell them about my life. I like to think they can hear me somehow. If you are watching this and you are going through something similar, if you have been abandoned by people who should have loved you, if you are carrying grief that feels too heavy to bear, I want you to know something. You will survive this. You will not just survive. You will build a beautiful life on the other side of your pain. It will not be easy. It will not be fast, but it will happen. The people who rejected you do not get to define your worth. Their cruelty says everything about them and nothing about you. You are worthy of love exactly as you are. And someday, you will find the people who see that, the people who choose you, the people who stay. That is the real surprise I had for my parents that day in the coffee shop. Not revenge, not bitterness. Just the simple, powerful truth that I had become everything they said I could never be. And I had done it without them. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after being abandoned by family? How did you find the strength to move forward? Leave your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I believe that sharing our experiences helps us all heal. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. If you want more stories about survival strength and finding your own path, subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And please share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to my story. I am sending you love wherever you are, whatever you are facing. Remember that you are stronger than you know. And remember that the best chapters of your life might still be waiting to be written. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.